After an exhausting night, she fell into the arms of the last person she expected, and in that urgent whisper, something within her changed forever. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post daily. Continuing, Marina had always detested events like this. The Ritz London in Mayfair was transformed into a display of vanity, where diamonds competed with forced smiles and where Chanel No. 5 couldn't disguise the scent of dirty money circulating through the halls. She adjusted the simple black dress she had bought from a department store, feeling utterly out of place amidst the designer outfits that cost more than her 6 months' salary. "Relax, Mari, it's just one night," murmured Roderick, her partner at the accounting firm, as he straightened his borrowed tie. "We need to be here. Half our clients will show up, and networking is still crucial for small firms like ours." Marina sighed, observing the opulent decor of the main ballroom. Bohemian crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like captured stars, reflecting light onto tables covered in golden fabric, and arrangements of white orchids that probably cost more than she earned in a week. The orchestra played classical music while waiters in tuxedos circulated, offering French champagne in crystal flutes. "I know, Roderick. I just can't understand how these people can spend so much money on a party when there are so many people in need out there." She accepted a glass of champagne, more to occupy her hands than out of a desire to drink. It was the London Business Association's charity ball, an annual event where the financial elite gathered to help charities, but which in practice served more to display power and conduct business. Marina had grown up in the East End of London, the daughter of a seamstress and a mechanic, and had earned her accounting degree through much study, night work, and determination. Seeing such ostentation made her uncomfortable, but she knew she needed to be there if she wanted to expand the small firm she shared with Roderick. "Good evening, Marina." The deep, familiar voice made her turn. It was Charles Montgomery, owner of a chain of pharmacies and one of the firm's most important clients. "Good evening, Mr. Montgomery. How are you?" Well. I wanted to introduce you to Dr. Raphael Ashton Sterling." Charles gestured to the man beside him. "He's the new CEO of Sterling & Associates, having recently taken over his father's company." Marina looked up and felt the air catch in her lungs. The man before her was tall, about 35, with dark hair precisely combed and brown eyes that seemed to penetrate directly into her soul. He wore an impeccable, clearly tailor-made tuxedo and carried a presence that made people around him automatically step back slightly, as if instinctively recognizing they were in front of someone powerful. "Pleased to meet you," Raphael said, extending his hand. When she accepted his handshake, she felt electricity course through her arm. His eyes lingered on hers for a moment longer than protocol required. "The pleasure is mine," Marina replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the sudden nervousness. Raphael Sterling. She knew the name, of course. Who in London's financial sector didn't? Sterling & Associates was one of the largest legal and financial consultancies in the country, with clients including major corporations and even government bodies. When the family patriarch, Dr. Anthony Sterling, had passed away the previous year, everyone speculated whether his son could maintain the empire. From the market chatter, Raphael had not only maintained the company but had expanded it impressively. "Marina has a very efficient accounting firm," Charles commented. "She works with small and medium-sized businesses, but with a quality of service that many of the large consultancies can't offer." "Interesting," Raphael murmured, his eyes still on Marina. "And do you enjoy what you do?" The question caught her off guard. Not by the question itself, but by the way he asked it, as if he genuinely wanted to know the answer, not just fulfilling social protocol. "Yes, I do. There's something satisfying about organizing numbers, finding solutions to complex problems, helping business owners better understand their finances." Marina realized she was speaking with more enthusiasm than she intended, especially when they're small business owners struggling to grow. "It's like I can be a part of their dreams, you know?" Raphael smiled, and it was the first genuine expression she had seen from him since he arrived at the event. "I understand perfectly. There's a difference between working just for money and finding purpose in what we do." Charles was called away by other acquaintances, leaving Marina and Raphael alone. It should have been an awkward moment, but for some reason it wasn't. "May I make a confession?" Raphael said, moving a little closer so he could speak in a lower tone. Marina nodded, curious. "I detest these events. I come because it's obligatory, because it's part of the role I need to play, but—" He paused, looking around the ballroom. "It's all so artificial. People here don't genuinely care about charity or helping others. It's all about appearances, about who has the most expensive watch or the youngest wife." His honesty surprised her. "Why are you telling me this? You barely know me." "Perhaps that's precisely why. Or perhaps it's because, since you arrived, you're the first person I've seen looking around with the same expression I have." Raphael took a sip of whiskey. Discomfort mixed with necessity. Marina laughed, a spontaneous laugh that surprised her. "That's a very accurate reading of the situation. I'm trained to read people, it's part of the job." His eyes sparkled with humor. "But may I try to read you a little more?" "You may try." Raphael studied her for a moment, as if deciphering an enigma. "You grew up without much money, but you were always the smartest in your class. You studied hard, worked, diligently, achieved everything on your own. You're proud of what you've built, but sometimes you feel out of place in environments like this because your success didn't come with the arrogance that seems to be mandatory in these circles." Marina widened her eyes. "How did you— Did I get it right?" "Frighteningly well." She took a sip of champagne, trying to process how a stranger had managed to read her life with such precision. "My turn?" "Please." Marina observed him carefully. Raphael had the confident posture of someone born with a silver spoon, but there was something in his eyes that suggested weight, responsibility. His hands were well kept, but not delicate. There were small marks indicating he wasn't just a decorative heir. "You took over the company very young, probably earlier than you planned. The weight of responsibility is enormous because it's not just a company, it's a family legacy. Everyone expected you to fail, so you worked twice as hard as anyone should to prove you deserve to be where you are." Marina paused, noticing how his expression had changed. "And you feel lonely, very lonely, because when you have the power you do, it's hard to know if people like you or just your position." The silence that followed was charged. Raphael stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "Impressive. You should consider a career in psychology." "Numbers are more predictable than people," Marina replied. "At least that's what I thought before tonight." The orchestra began to play a waltz, and couples started heading to the dance floor. Raphael extended his hand to Marina. "May I have this dance?" Marina hesitated. Dancing with him meant entering that world completely, even if for a few minutes. It meant accepting that something was happening between them, something that probably shouldn't be happening. "I don't dance very well," she admitted. "I lead," Raphael said with a smile that made her heart race. On the dance floor, he guided her with confidence and gentleness. Marina was surprised to find that she could follow his steps perfectly, as if they had danced together many times before. "How did you learn to dance so well?" she asked as he spun her elegantly. "Compulsory lessons in childhood. My mother insisted a gentleman should know how to dance." His tone was amused. "And you? You said you don't dance well, but you're lying." "My grandmother. She loved music and taught me some basic steps when I was a child. She used to say every woman should know how to move with grace." Marina felt a pang of longing. "She died when I was 15. "I'm sorry." "Thank you. She'd be proud to see me here today, I think. She always said I'd go far." They danced in silence for a few moments, lost in the music and the proximity. Marina could feel his subtle scent, something expensive but not overpowering, and the firmness of his hands. When the music ended, neither of them pulled away. Immediately. "Are you hungry?" Raphael asked. "A little." "How about we get out of here? I know a place that serves the best Italian food in the city, and it's much quieter than this." Marina looked around. Roderick was engaged in an animated conversation with potential clients and waved at her when he noticed her gaze, signaling that it was fine if she left. "Why would I leave with you?" she asked, but there was more curiosity than resistance in her voice. "Because you're as tired as I am of this charade, because there's a chance we could have a real conversation, away from all this. He gestured to the ballroom. Performance. Marina knew she should say no. She knew there was a huge difference between their worlds, that probably nothing good could come of it. But there was something in his eyes, a sincerity that made her want to discover who Raphael Sterling truly was when he wasn't playing the role of powerful CEO. "All right," she finally said, "but I'll drive myself there." Raphael smiled. "I wouldn't expect anything less." The Italian restaurant was in an old building in Notting Hill, far from the glamour of Mayfair where the ball had taken place. It was small, cozy, with rustic wooden tables and candles that created an intimate atmosphere. Raphael was clearly known there, as they were led to a reserved table in the back, away from other customers. "I've been coming here since university," Raphael explained as they sat down. "Don Giuseppe, the owner, is a real Sicilian. The food is exactly like what he ate in his childhood." During dinner, they talked about everything: books, movies, travels, dreams. Marina discovered that Raphael had studied law at Oxbridge and earned a master's degree at Harvard, but his secret dream had always been to be an architect. He discovered that she played guitar in her free time and wrote short stories, though she had never shown them to anyone. "Why don't you publish?" Raphael asked, after she mentioned her passion for writing. "Fear, mainly, and lack of time. The firm consumes a lot of my energy." "May I read something sometime?" Marina laughed. "Perhaps, if you promise not to laugh." "I solemnly promise." When they finished eating, it was almost midnight. Raphael insisted on walking her to her car, but in the parking lot, Marina turned to him. "Thank you. For dinner. It was unexpected. In a good way. In the best possible way." They stood there, just inches from each other. Marina knew she should get in her car and leave, ending the night as an interesting experience that shouldn't be repeated. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Do you want to come up for coffee? I live nearby." Raphael's eyes intensified. "Are you sure?" "No," Marina admitted, "but I want to anyway." Marina's flat in Chelsea was simple but cozy, decorated with furniture she had bought gradually, books stacked on makeshift shelves, and plants she cared for lovingly. Raphael looked around with genuine curiosity. "It's exactly as I imagined it would be," he said. "What do you mean?" "Welcoming. Real. Like you." Marina made coffee while Raphael examined her bookshelf. She was nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred sugar. What was she doing? This went against all her principles, against her cautious nature. "Are you regretting it?" Raphael asked, as if he could read her thoughts. Marina turned to face him. He was leaning against the kitchen doorway, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "I should be," she answered honestly. "But you're not." "No." Raphael approached slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished, but Marina didn't retreat. When he touched her face delicately, she closed her eyes, losing herself in the sensation. "Marina," he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. When she opened her eyes, she saw in him all the vulnerability she had guessed existed behind his professional facade. And then he kissed her, and the world disappeared around them. What happened in the following hours was intense, overwhelming, transformative. It wasn't just physical, though the chemistry between them was undeniable. It was an emotional connection neither of them expected, a complete surrender that left them changed. When the sun began to rise, Marina woke nestled in Raphael's arms, listening to the soft sound of his breathing. For a few minutes, she allowed herself to simply exist in that moment, savoring the feeling of completeness she had never experienced before. But reality began to knock when her phone rang, reminding her she had an important meeting in the morning. Carefully, she got out of bed without waking Raphael and went to shower. When she came out of the bathroom, she found him awake, watching her with a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice still thick with sleep. "Good morning, sorry, I need to leave for a meeting." Raphael sat up in bed, making no move to dress immediately. "Marina, about last night." "It was wonderful," she interrupted him, trying to keep her tone light. But you don't need to say anything. I know it was just one night. His expression changed. Is that what you think? That it was just a one-night stand? Marina hesitated, not knowing how to respond. A part of her desperately wanted it to mean more, but the rational part knew that men like Raphael Sterling didn't fall for women like her. I need to go, she finally said, grabbing her bag and avoiding looking at him. Raphael got up and reached her at the bedroom door. Marina, wait. She turned, and what she saw in his eyes made her want to cry. It wasn't indifference, it wasn't regret. It was something far more dangerous. It was hope. May I call you? He asked, gently touching her arm. Marina nodded, not trusting her own voice. After she left, Raphael stood in the middle of the empty flat, trying to process what had happened. In his carefully controlled life, where every move was calculated and every decision strategic, Marina had been an unexpected hurricane. And for the first time in years, Raphael Sterling allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to let go of total control of his life. Over the following days, Marina tried to return to her normal routine, but found it impossible. Raphael kept his word and called the same day, his voice filled with a tenderness she didn't expect from a man with his reputation. How was your meeting? He asked, and there was genuine interest in the question. Productive. I managed to close an important contract. Marina was in her office trying to keep her voice professional, while Roderick worked at the desk next to her. That's good. You mentioned it yesterday, about how you like to see your clients' dreams come true. You must be happy. The fact that he remembered a seemingly small detail from their conversation touched her more than it should have. I am. And you? How was your day? Full of boring meetings where people tried to convince me to invest in questionable projects. Nothing like the conversation we had yesterday. There was a pause. Marina, I'd like to see you again. Her heart pounded. Raphael, I know you must be thinking we're from different worlds, that this is complicated, but I can't stop thinking about you, about the way you see the world, about your honesty. It's rare to find someone who is simply real. Marina closed her eyes, battling between reason and heart. Where do you want to meet me? Somewhere out of the spotlight, away from people who know us. How about Borough Market on Saturday morning? We can have coffee and codfish fritters. The suggestion made her smile. It was so different from what she would expect from someone like him. You go to Borough Market? My grandmother used to take me there when I was a child. It's one of the few places in London where I still feel normal. That's how they started meeting, always in discreet places away from both their social circles. Raphael revealed himself to be completely different from his public image. He was attentive, funny, curious about her life. He would send messages during the day asking how her lunch was, if she liked the book he recommended, if she was tired after a difficult day at the office. Good night, Marina. I hope you had a less stressful day than yesterday. I dreamed about you last night. We were walking on the beach in Brighton. You were laughing at something I'd said. Sleep well. R. His messages were like that. Affectionate, detailed, intimate. Nothing like the dry texts she imagined a CEO would send. Raphael told her about his routine, about work frustrations, about how she made him want to be a better version of himself. I just came out of a horrible meeting where I had to lay off 15 employees. I hate that part of the job. I keep thinking about their families. You have a strange effect on me. You're making me more human. I don't know if that's good or bad for business, but it's definitely good for my soul. Marina found herself eagerly awaiting each message, smiling to herself as she read them. Roderick began to comment that she seemed different, lighter, more cheerful. Anyone new in your life? He asked one Thursday afternoon as they reviewed a client's financial reports. Why do you ask? Because you're radiant, and because you're checking your phone every 5 minutes, as if you're waiting for something important. Marina blushed. It's complicated. The best relationships always are. That night, she and Raphael met at a small Japanese restaurant in Chinatown. He arrived before her and had already ordered the sake she had mentioned liking. When she entered, he stood up to greet her, delicately kissing her cheek. How was your day? he asked after they sat down. Better now, Marina replied, surprised by her own honesty. During dinner, Raphael spoke about his childhood, about the pressure of growing up as the heir to a financial empire, about how he had lost his father too soon and taken on responsibilities that still haunted him. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about all the people who depend on the decisions I make. Employees, clients, investors. It's a weight that never lessens. And when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? Raphael smiled, a nostalgic smile. A vet. I wanted to care for abandoned animals. I was sure I'd build a giant shelter where all stray dogs and cats could live happily. What happened to that dream? Reality, my father explained very patiently that I had greater responsibilities, that running a company meant caring for thousands of families, that my personal dreams had to take a back seat. Marina reached across the table and touched his hand. It's never too late to reclaim parts of who we are. Do you really believe that? I do. Maybe we can't be exactly who we dreamed of being at 10 years old, but we can find ways to honor those dreams. Raphael intertwined his fingers with hers. Like how? You want to care for animals? How about funding shelters? You have the power to do that now. In a way you might not have as a vet. You could be the guardian angel of hundreds of animals. His eyes sparkled. You know what? I'd never thought of it that way. It's what I said the first night we met. You're different from what I imagined. You're much more human. And you make me want to be even more human. They left the restaurant hand in hand, walking slowly through the streets of Chinatown. It was a warm March night, and there were families on the streets, children playing, the comforting noise of a city that never slept. May I confess something? Raphael said, stopping under a lamppost. Always. In the last 15 years since I started working at my father's company, I never allowed myself to feel what I'm feeling for you. I always thought relationships were a distraction, a weakness I couldn't afford to have. Marina felt her heart tighten. And now I think I was just surviving, not living. You made me remember the difference. They went back to her flat together, and again the night was intense, full of a passion that went far beyond the physical. In each other's arms, they talked until dawn about fears, dreams, about how life had been different for each of them. My biggest fantasy as a teenager, Marina confessed, was to have a big family, a house with a garden where I could plant flowers, children running everywhere. It sounds silly, but it doesn't sound silly, it sounds perfect. Raphael pulled her closer. And why didn't you realize that fantasy? First, because I was focused on studying, then on building a career. And I never found someone who wanted to build that with me. Most men I met wanted a woman who was just decorative. You would never be decorative, you are essential. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning. But it was the following week that things began to take a sinister turn. Marina was leaving the office one Thursday afternoon when she noticed a black car parked across the street. It wouldn't have been a big deal except that the same car had been there when she arrived that morning and when she went out for lunch. And now again. On Friday, the car was there again. Roderick, have you noticed that black Civic parked in front of the building? Roderick looked out the window. Which one? Marina moved closer to the window, but the car was no longer there. Never mind. On Saturday night, as she drove home after another date with Raphael, Marina had the strange sensation of being followed. In her rearview mirror, she saw a car maintain the same distance behind her for several blocks. When she changed lanes, the car changed too. When she turned an unnecessary corner, the car followed her. Her heart pounded. She sped up a little, made some erratic turns, and only relaxed when she arrived at her building without seeing the suspicious vehicle again. Paranoia, she murmured to herself as she rode the lift up. But on Monday, her phone rang 3 times. With each call, someone answered but said nothing, just breathing heavily before hanging up. Raphael, she said when he called that night, can I ask you something strange? Of course. Did you tell anyone about us? There was a long pause. No. Why? Did you? Only Roderick, and even then I didn't give details. It's just that I've had the feeling of being watched. It might be paranoia, but... What kind of observation? Marina told him. About the car, about the silent calls. On the other end of the line, Raphael was quiet for a long moment. Marina, I want you to be very careful, all right? If you notice anything strange, call me immediately. Do you think it has something to do with us? I don't know, but in my line of work, there are always people interested in finding weaknesses, ways to blackmail or pressure. It might just be a coincidence, but I would never forgive myself if anything happened to you. The call ended with Marina even more worried. In the following days, she redoubled her attention, but the strange signs seemed to diminish. The car disappeared, the calls stopped. She began to relax, thinking it really had been paranoia. It was on a sunny April afternoon that the bomb exploded in her life. Marina was organizing documents for a new client when the office doorbell rang. Roderick had gone out for a meeting, so she went to answer it herself. A middle-aged man, wearing a grey suit and carrying a leather briefcase, stood at the entrance. He had the formal, serious appearance of a civil servant. Marina Sterling? That's me. I'm Bailiff Robert Lewis. I have a summons for you. Marina felt her blood run cold. A summons? You are being called as a witness in case number 2024 LDN 0847 concerning alleged fraud and corruption involving the company Deltacom Business Solutions. The hearing will be presided over by Justice Raphael Ashton Sterling at the Royal Courts of Justice. The world stopped. Marina took the envelope with trembling hands, barely able to process the words she had just heard. Fraud. Corruption. Deltacom. A company that had been a client of the firm the previous year. And Raphael. Raphael would be the judge. There. Must be a mistake, she managed to say in a weak voice. No, madam, the summons is correct. The hearing will be next Monday at 2 p.m. Your presence is mandatory. After the bailiff left, Marina was alone in the office, holding the summons as if it were a bomb about to explode. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and read the details. Deltacom was being accused of overbilling in public contracts, falsifying tax documents, and money laundering. Marina's firm had handled the company's accounting for 6 months the previous year before they decided to switch to a larger consultancy. And she was being called as a witness because she had been responsible for some of the reports now under investigation. Worst of all, the document indicated that the case would be judged by Dr. Raphael Ashton Sterling of the High Court of Justice in London. Marina sat heavily in her chair, trying to breathe. The implications of the situation hit her like a tsunami. She was a witness in a case Raphael would judge. They had an intimate personal relationship. If this came to light, it could destroy his career, question the impartiality of the judgment, and turn both of them into a national scandal. With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and dialed the only lawyer she knew personally, Dr. Paul Maxwell, who had been a university colleague. Paul, it's Marina. I need to talk to you urgently. They met at a discreet coffee shop in the city centre. Paul read the summons with an increasingly grave expression. Marina, this is serious. Deltacom is involved in a corruption scheme that could amount to £50 million. If you were their accountant, I know it looks bad, but I didn't know anything. We only handled the operational. Part payroll, basic reports. When they asked for things that seemed strange to me, I suggested they look for a larger consultancy. And what exactly is your problem? You go there, tell the truth, and that's it. Marina took a deep breath. The problem is that I'm romantically involved with the judge of the case. Paul dropped his coffee on the table. What? Raphael Sterling. We've been seeing each other for a few weeks. Marina, do you realize what this means? I think so, but I want you to explain it clearly. Paul ran a hand over his face, visibly shaken. If this relationship comes to light during the trial, it could be used to question his impartiality. It could force the annulment of the process. It could destroy his career as a judge, and it could make you look like someone who associates with authorities to gain benefits. But I didn't know. I only found out today that he would be the judge. It doesn't matter. The appearance of a conflict of interest is enough to cause a huge scandal. The media would love a story about a judge who dates a witness in a corruption case. Marina felt tears burning her eyes. What do I do? Paul was silent for a long moment. Legally, you have to report this conflict. Raphael will have to recuse himself and pass the case to another judge. And personally? Personally, Marina, you need to distance yourself from him immediately. Any contact between you from now on could be interpreted as an attempt to influence the process. If anyone finds out you continued talking after you knew about the trial... The sentence hung in the air, but Marina understood perfectly. She would have to choose between protecting Raphael and protecting her own life. And she knew that if she truly loved him, there was only one possible choice. That night, Marina stayed awake until dawn, holding her phone, typing and deleting messages for Raphael. How to explain that everything had changed? How to say that the love blossoming between them could destroy everything he had built? Finally, at 6 in the morning, she typed a cold, distant message, completely different from anything she had sent him before. Raphael, I need to step away for a while. It's best if we don't talk anymore. Thank you for everything. Marina. After sending it, she blocked his number on all apps, closed her social media, and prepared to disappear from the life of the man she had learned to love. Across town, Raphael read the message 3 times before understanding that Marina had simply decided he wasn't worth it. And for the first time in 15 years, Raphael Sterling cried. The months that followed were the most difficult of Marina's life. She religiously observed her emotional self-exile, refusing to look for news about Raphael, blocking anything that might remind her of him. But that was practically impossible in London. The name Sterling and Associates appeared on billboards across the city, in newspaper articles, in casual client conversations. Roderick noticed the change immediately. Marina, who had always been dedicated but balanced, became obsessed with work. She arrived at the office before 7 in the morning and left after 10 at night. She accepted any client, any project, anything that could keep her mind occupied. Marie, you need to rest, he said one June afternoon, finding her for the 3rd time that week asleep over documents on her desk. When was the last time you went out, watched a movie, did anything other than work? I'm fine, she replied automatically, but the deep, dark circles under her eyes and her weight loss said otherwise. No, you're not. And I don't want to know who the idiot was who hurt you, but you can't go on like this. Marina lifted her eyes from the reports. Please don't insist on it. All right, but at least take a few days off, go visit your mother in Brighton, go to the beach, do something. In fact, Marina had considered visiting her mother several times, but always backed out. Mrs. Rose had a gift for reading her daughter's heart with just a glance, and Marina wasn't prepared to explain why she had lost 10 kilograms and developed chronic insomnia. What made it all worse was that she had discovered, through an online search she couldn't resist doing, that Raphael had indeed recused himself from the Deltacom case. The process had been transferred to another judge, Dr. Charles Blackwood, a man known for his rigidity and impartiality. The news briefly mentioned that Dr. Sterling had stepped down due to ethical concerns related to a possible conflict of interest, but gave no details. Marina hated herself for feeling relief. At least his career was protected, but deep in her heart, a part of her hoped he would try to make contact, that he would insist on an explanation, that he would fight for her. He didn't. Across town, Raphael was going through his own months of hell. Marina's cold message had hit him like a shot to the chest, especially because he couldn't understand what he had done wrong. In the first few days, he tried to call. The numbers were blocked. He sent emails that bounced back automatically. He even thought about showing up at her office, but his formal upbringing prevented him from harassing a woman who clearly no longer wanted to see him. She simply decided you're not worth it, he told himself one night, alone in his Chelsea penthouse, looking out at the illuminated city through his home office window. Accept it and move on. But moving on proved impossible. Raphael plunged into work with an intensity that even his closest partners found frightening. He was judging more cases than any other magistrate in the court, working 16 hours a day, reviewing processes during weekends. Raphael, you need to take a holiday, said Dr. Albert Coleman, the president of the High Court, during an informal conversation. I know the separation from the Deltacom case was annoying, but it wasn't annoying. It was necessary, Raphael cut in. And I'm fine. You don't look it. It was true. Raphael had lost weight, developed a permanently tense expression, and become even colder with subordinates. The human version Marina had awakened in him seemed to have completely disappeared. In fact, something strange had happened when he recused himself from the Deltacom case. When he first read the process to understand the nature of the conflict, he was intrigued. There was something in the accusations that didn't quite add up, small details, subtle inconsistencies, but his 15 years of experience as a magistrate had developed an instinct for detecting when something was being forced. But it was no longer his case, so he filed away his suspicions and tried to forget. The reunion happened on a rainy Monday in August. Marina stood outside the Royal Courts of Justice under a borrowed umbrella, trying to gather courage to go in. She had arrived an hour early, but couldn't make her legs move towards the main entrance. In the past 2 months, the Deltacom case had grown to enormous proportions. The media had discovered ramifications of the corruption scheme that reached provincial town halls and some public companies. Marina had been called to testify twice more in preliminary hearings, always answering the same questions: what she had seen, when she had seen it, why she had left the company. Her version was always the same because it was the truth. She had only handled basic accounting, and when they started asking for reports that seemed strange, she had suggested they hire a larger consultancy. But today would be the main hearing, where formal charges would be presented, and Marina knew that the evidence against her was much more serious than in previous hearings. 2 days earlier, her lawyer, now she needed a lawyer, had called with disturbing news. "Marina, they found your emails authorizing suspicious transfers, and documents signed by you approving reports that clearly doctored the company's finances." "That's impossible. I believe you, but the emails are very convincing. They appear to have been sent from your computer. They have your digital signature. Someone fabricated all this, probably, but we need to prove it." Now, standing in the rain, Marina knew her professional reputation was hanging by a thread. If she were found guilty, she would lose her accountant's license, face criminal charges, and see the firm she had built with so much effort collapse. She took a deep breath and entered the building. The courtroom was packed. Lawyers, journalists, onlookers, prosecutors. Marina was led to the witness stand, trying to maintain an upright posture despite the nervousness that made her hands tremble. It was then that she looked at the judge's bench and saw him. Raphael was seated in the official position, wearing the black robe, with the impassive expression she had seen in newspaper photos. For a moment their eyes met, and Marina felt as if the entire world had stopped. He showed no emotion, no recognition. He just looked at her for 2 seconds and then lowered his eyes to the documents in front of him. Marina felt her legs give way. She didn't understand. Why was he there? Hadn't he recused himself from the case? Dr. Paul, her lawyer, approached her during a break. "Marina, Dr. Blackwood had a heart attack last week. The case was urgently reassigned. Since you didn't tell me you knew Dr. Sterling personally, I couldn't." Question: "I don't know him," she lied, her voice barely audible. It's just a coincidence." The hearing proceeded with Marina being interrogated by prosecutors, defense lawyers, and representatives of the other companies involved. She answered every question honestly, denying any knowledge of irregularities, explaining that she had left Deltacom precisely because she suspected something was wrong. It was when the prosecutor presented the evidence that everything fell apart. "Your Honor, I would like to present to the court a series of emails sent by Ms. Marina Sterling, in which she clearly authorizes irregular transfers and approves falsified reports." The emails were displayed on the courtroom screen. Marina read with horror messages she had supposedly sent, authorizing suspicious financial movements, discussing necessary adjustments to numbers, dealing with strategies to mask certain transactions. "I never wrote these messages," she said, her voice breaking. "I swear I never—" "Miss Sterling," the prosecutor said in a condescending tone, "these emails were sent from your computer with your certified digital signature. Are you saying someone hacked your system?" "I am saying this is false. I would never write such things because I would never do such things." The prosecutor smiled like a predator who had found easy prey. Your Honor, the defendant is clearly lying to try and escape the consequences of her criminal acts. It was at that moment that Raphael spoke. Ms. Sterling, he said, his voice official but not hostile, could you explain in detail your work routine at Deltacom? Specifically, who had access to your computer, how authorizations were made, what type of documents you regularly signed? Marina took a deep breath and began to explain in detail how her work functioned. As she spoke, Raphael asked specific technical questions about digital security procedures, about how electronic signatures were made, about who else in the company had access to the systems. His questions were intelligent, targeted, and Marina realized he wasn't just following protocol, he was investigating. After 2 hours of interrogation, Raphael suspended the hearing. Counsel, I would like a meeting in my chambers before we proceed. Marina was led to a waiting room where she sat alone, trying to process what had happened. Seeing Raphael again had been devastating. He was thinner, more serious, more distant, and she couldn't decipher whether he believed her or was just doing his job. An hour later, Dr. Paul returned with a confused expression. Marina, something strange is happening. The judge ordered all Deltacom computers and systems to be sealed and sent for independent forensic technical analysis, and he also requested access logs for all employees to internal systems during the period in question. Is that good or bad? I don't know, but it's unusual. In the days that followed, Raphael worked discreetly with a cybercrime specialist. Something in the questions he had asked Marina, in her answers, in the inconsistencies of the presented emails, had triggered his investigative instincts. Dr. Edward Ferris, the digital forensics expert, was clear in his preliminary report. Dr. Sterling, there are several irregularities in this evidence. The digital signatures were applied retroactively. The metadata of the files were altered, and there are traces of remote access to Ms. Sterling's system from locations that don't match where she was on those days. Are you telling me someone fabricated this evidence? I am saying that this evidence was fabricated by someone with advanced technical knowledge, and it wasn't amateurish. Whoever did this knew exactly how to make the falsifications convincing for a superficial analysis. Raphael felt a mixture of anger and determination. Someone had set a trap for Marina, using her as a scapegoat in a much larger scheme. Doctor, I need you to deepen this investigation. I want to know who did this, how they did it, and why. It will take a few weeks. I have time. But Raphael didn't rely solely on technical expertise. He discreetly hired a private investigation firm, specializing in corporate crimes, to analyze the entire Deltacom scheme from a broader perspective. What they discovered was even more disturbing than he imagined. Deltacom was just one piece in a much larger corruption scheme, involving at least 10 medium-sized companies, 2 large construction firms, and a money laundering operation that passed through tax havens in the Cayman Islands, and Marina had been deliberately placed as the company's accountant precisely because her profile, young, honest, without political connections, made her the perfect scapegoat. Dr. Sterling, said Caroline Reed, the private investigator, during a discreet meeting in a city center cafe, Miss Sterling was a victim from day one. They hired her specifically because they needed someone clean to blame later. What do you mean? Look at the profiles of the other employees who were fired or resigned from Deltacom during the same period. All were honest, competent people, with no history of problems, and all were placed in positions where they could be easily incriminated when the scheme was discovered. Raphael felt anger surge in his chest. And who is behind this? That's the interesting part. From the financial trails and communication patterns we managed to track, it appears that someone from within the judiciary system is protecting the true culprits and directing investigations towards the victims. Someone from within the judiciary? Caroline nodded gravely. Someone with access to information about ongoing investigations, with power to influence prosecutors, with the ability to manipulate evidence. Raphael was silent for a long moment. If this were true, it meant that the very system he represented was being used to destroy innocent people. I want all the details, he finally said. No matter where this leads. no matter who is involved. Doctor, this could be dangerous. If we're right about the level of people involved, I don't care. I will not allow them to destroy innocent people. A week later, Raphael had a complete dossier on the scheme. The evidence was irrefutable. Marina had been deliberately set up as a scapegoat. The incriminating emails had been fabricated by a hacker specifically hired for that purpose, and at least 3 people within the judiciary system were receiving payments to ensure that investigations followed specific directions. On the morning of the final hearing, Raphael made the most important decision of his career. When the prosecutor rose to present his final remarks, asking for the conviction of Marina and the other small pieces of the scheme, Raphael interrupted him. Dr. Matthews, before your final remarks, I would like to present to the court some additional evidence that has come to my knowledge. The prosecutor seemed confused. What evidence, Your Honor? Raphael stood up, removing his robe in a gesture that caused murmurs in the crowded room. Evidence that this trial is based on falsified proofs, that Ms. Marina Sterling was deliberately framed by people who wanted to hide the true culprits, and that there is a conspiracy within the judiciary system itself to protect the real criminals. The room erupted in chaos. Journalists shouted questions, lawyers stood up in protest. The prosecutor seemed to have been shocked, but Raphael continued, his voice cutting through the noise. And since we are talking about conflicts of interest, I must inform the court that I have a personal relationship with Ms. Marina, a relationship that began before I knew of her connection to this case, and that ended when she discovered I would be the presiding judge. Marina felt the world spin around her. Raphael had just sacrificed his career for her. She tried to protect me by distancing herself, Raphael continued, now looking directly at her, but I cannot protect her if I do not reveal the truth. He signaled to the bailiffs, who brought in boxes of documents. Gentlemen, these are the real evidences about the Deltacom scheme, evidences that prove Ms. Marina's innocence and identify the true culprits. The explosion that followed was greater than anything the royal courts of justice had seen in decades. The consequences of Raphael's revelation were devastating and immediate. Even before the end of that afternoon, the news had spread across all London media outlets. Judge resigns and exposes corruption scheme to save beloved woman was the sensationalist headline dominating news portals. Marina left the courthouse amidst a storm of camera flashes and shouted questions from reporters. Ms. Sterling, is it true you seduced the judge to escape prison? How did you meet? How long have you been in this relationship? Dr. Paul escorted her through the crowd, pushing her into a taxi that took them directly to the office. There, they locked the door and closed the curtains, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. Marina, do you realize what Dr. Sterling just did? Paul asked, nervously running his hands through his hair. He just destroyed his own career to protect you. I know, she replied, her voice broken. I know, and that's exactly why I distanced myself from him, to prevent something like this from happening. But now it has happened. The question is, what are you going to do? Marina had no answer. In the past 6 months, she had built an emotional wall so high around her heart that she no longer knew how to allow herself to love someone. And now, Raphael had sacrificed himself for her in a way that made it impossible to pretend they meant nothing to each other. Across town, Raphael was facing his own months of hell. The High Court of Justice had convened an emergency meeting, and he knew his career as a magistrate had come to an end. Raphael, said Dr. Albert Coleman, the president of the High Court, his voice laden with disappointment and sadness, do you understand that what you did today is an unprecedented procedure? That it compromises not only your own position, but could cast doubt on the credibility of the entire judiciary system? I understand, Dr. Coleman, but I couldn't remain silent watching innocent people be destroyed by a corruption scheme. That doesn't justify the fact that you concealed a personal relationship with one of those involved in the case. Raphael took a deep breath. You are right, I made a serious ethical error. I accept the consequences. The consequences, Raphael, are your immediate suspension from duty, the opening of disciplinary proceedings, and most likely the definitive loss of your position as a judge. I accept. Dr. Coleman studied him for a long moment. Why, Raphael? You had everything. A brilliant career, respect, power, influence. Why throw it all away? Raphael looked out the office window, where he could see the frantic movement of journalists at the courthouse door. Because I discovered that there is something more important than career and power, Dr. Coleman. I discovered that I cannot live with myself if I allow the person I love to be destroyed by a corrupt system. In the following days, the story gained national proportions. The documents Raphael had presented revealed a corruption scheme involving dozens of companies, several politicians, and at least 5 members of the judiciary system. The scandal became known as Operation False Witness and resulted in the arrest of 43 people, including 2 prosecutors, a high court judge, and the CEO of Deltacom himself. But the personal price was extremely high for both of them. Raphael definitively lost his position as a judge and saw his reputation shattered by the media. Some outlets portrayed him as a hero, others as a man who had lost emotional control and compromised British justice. Sterling and Associates, the family company, lost several important clients who did not want to be associated with the scandal. Marina, though legally acquitted, saw her professional career collapse. Clients cancelled contracts, suppliers suspended services, and she received anonymous threats from people who believed she had manipulated a judge to escape prison. The small firm she had built with so much effort had to close its doors. It was Roderick who suggested she leave London for a while. Marina, you need to disappear. Until this storm passes, every time you go out, someone recognizes you. It's not healthy. Where would I go? I don't know. Anywhere far from here. In fact, it was Raphael who resolved the situation. 3 weeks after the explosion of Operation False Witness, he appeared at her flat door. He was different, thinner, unshaven, in casual clothes instead of impeccable suits. But his eyes had the same intensity she remembered from the first night they spent together. Raphael, she began, but he interrupted her. I know you'll want to send me away. I know you'll say this. Is all your fault? That you tried to protect me, that you shouldn't have let things get to this point? He paused, studying her face. But before you say anything, I want you to know one thing. What? I don't regret it. Marina felt tears burn her eyes. Raphael, you lost everything because of me. No, I lost a position, I lost a title, I lost status, but I discovered something worth more than all of that combined. He took a step closer. I discovered that I love you. And I discovered that I cannot live pretending to be someone. See, I'm not just to keep up appearances. But what now? What will you do with your life? Raphael smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in months. Remember that conversation we had about reclaiming old dreams? Well, I'm going to open a law firm specializing in defending people like you. Honest people who have been victims of corruption schemes. Marina stared at him, trying to process his words. You're going to be a solicitor? I already am. And I thought perhaps you could be my partner, handle the accounting side of the firm. Raphael, my reputation is destroyed. No one will want to hire my services. They will, yes, because we will work for people who know what it's like to be unjustly accused, and because together we are stronger than any scandal. It was then that he held her hands. Marina, before you decide anything about work or the future, I need an answer to one question. Which one? Do you still love me? The question hung in the air between them. Marina had spent months trying to convince herself no, trying to bury her feelings, trying to protect both of them from pain. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability he rarely showed, she couldn't lie anymore. Yes, she whispered. I love you. More than I imagined it was possible to love someone. Then marry me. Marina widened her eyes. What? Marry me. Not because it's convenient, not because it's strategic, not because it will improve our public image. Marry me because even with all this confusion, even with all the pressure, even knowing it will be difficult, I can't imagine my life without you. Raphael, I know it's crazy. I know the timing is terrible. I know we will face 1,000 difficulties. But I also know that what we feel for each other is real, and that if we let fear and circumstances decide for us, we will regret it for the rest of our lives. Marina closed her eyes, trying to think clearly. But when she opened them again, she saw Raphael kneeling in her living room, holding a simple box with a ring that had no expensive diamonds or elaborate gold, just a delicate solitaire, beautiful in its simplicity. "It's not ostentatious," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. "I thought you would prefer something discreet, elegant—" "It's perfect," she interrupted him, extending her trembling hand. Raphael slid the ring onto her finger, and for a moment they just looked at each other, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. "And now?" Marina asked. "Now we leave London for a while. Let this storm pass. We'll go somewhere we can breathe, think, plan the future without spotlights and journalists." "Do you have somewhere in mind?" Raphael smiled. "Remember you mentioned liking the beach? I have a house on the Isle of Wight that I inherited from my grandmother. It's simple, right on the sand, away from everything. We can stay there for as long as we need." A week later, they were driving down the road that led to the Isle of Wight, leaving behind London, the scandals, the pressures, and all the weight of the past months. Marina looked out the window, watching the city give way to the green of the Peak District, feeling for the first time in a long time that she could breathe deeply. "Regretting it?" Raphael asked, noticing her silence. "Quite the opposite. I'm free. For the first time in months, I'm free." The house on the Isle of Wight was exactly as Raphael had described, simple, cozy, with a veranda facing directly onto the sea. It had no luxuries or ostentation, just the essentials for a peaceful life. 3 bedrooms, a rustic but functional kitchen, a living room with large windows that framed the ocean view. "Your grandmother had good taste," Marina commented, exploring the space. "She used to say a beach house should be a refuge, not a display, a place to rest the soul, not to impress visitors." In the first few days, they simply existed. They woke up late, had coffee on the veranda listening to the sound of the waves, walked on the beach, cooked simple meals together. Marina rediscovered the pleasure of reading for pleasure, unhurried, without an agenda. Raphael bought a stand-up paddleboard and spent hours in the water, letting the sea wash away years of accumulated stress. "You know what?" Marina said one afternoon as they lay on the sand watching the sunset. "I had forgotten how good it feels to have no schedule for anything." "Me too. For the past 15 years, my life has been dictated by clocks, calendars, agendas, always rushing to the next meeting, the next commitment." "And you don't miss it?" Raphael thought for a moment. "I miss the feeling of being useful, of solving important problems, but I don't miss the constant pressure, the need to always appear in control of everything." "You can still be useful. You will be, when we go back and set up the firm." "It will be different, won't it? I won't have the power I had before, the status—" Marina turned to face him. "Raphael, do you really want the honest opinion of someone who met you at the height of your power?" "I do. You're more attractive now, more human, more real, more approachable." The powerful man was impressive, but this man here who knows how to make tapioca and doesn't mind having sand on his feet, this one I love much more. They were silent for a moment, watching the waves. "Marina, may I ask you something?" "Always. When you found out about the trial, when you decided to pull away, was it very difficult?" Marina sighed. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every night I picked up the phone to call you, typed messages and deleted them, cried myself to sleep. But I truly thought I was protecting you. And you were. If you hadn't pulled away, if we had continued seeing each other, the scandal would have been much worse. I probably would have been accused of active corruption. Do you regret it, telling me the truth publicly?" Raphael pulled her closer. "Never, because I discovered that I prefer to be a man of integrity without power than a powerful man without integrity." It was during their 3rd week on the Isle of Wight that they received a call that would change everything again. Dr. Paul called with surprising news. "Marina, you need to see the news, the operation. False witness scandal has reached the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, and Dr. Sterling is being considered a national hero. They turned on the television to discover that the investigation initiated by Raphael's revelation had exposed the largest judicial corruption scheme in the country's history. The president of the Supreme Court had made a public statement praising Raphael's courage in exposing the corrupt system, even knowing it would cost him his career. "And there's more," Paul continued on the phone. "Several businesses in London are calling, wanting to hire both of you. They want a firm that represents honesty. Amidst so much corruption." Marina and Raphael looked at each other, processing the information. "Does that mean—" Marina began. "It means you've become symbols of integrity. People are tired of corruption. They want to believe that honest professionals still exist." After they hung up, they sat on the veranda, watching the sea and trying to process how their lives had changed again. "So," Raphael said after a long silence, "it seems we'll have our firm sooner than we imagined." "It seems so. Are you ready to go back?" Raphael looked around at the simple house, at the sea, at the peaceful life they had temporarily built. "I'm ready to go back with you, but I want us to always have this place. When life gets too complicated, when we need to remember what truly matters, I want us to be able to come back here." Marina smiled. "Agreed. This will be our base, our refuge, our heart's home." "Our heart's home," she repeated, liking the expression. That night, they walked along the beach under the stars, planning the future, talking about the kind of firm they wanted to build, about the cases they wanted to take, about how to use the traumatic experience they had lived to help other people. "You know what I'm most proud of in this whole story?" Marina said, stopping to look at the moon's reflection on the water. "What?" "That in the end, we chose correctly. We chose honesty even when it was difficult. We chose to protect each other when it seemed selfish. We chose to fight together when it seemed impossible." Raphael kissed her softly. "And we chose love when it was risky." "And we chose love when it was risky," she agreed. At the end of that month on the Isle of Wight, they returned to London transformed, not just as a couple, but as people who had discovered that their values were more important than their ambitions, that their integrity was worth more than any social position, and they were ready to build a new life based on these discoveries. Their return to London in October was completely different from the escape they had made 3 months earlier. As their car entered the city, Marina felt a mix of nostalgia and determination. She was no longer the same woman who had left there emotionally broken, and Raphael was no longer the powerful but solitary magistrate who had sacrificed everything for love. They were now a team, partners in life and business, united by an experience that had tested them in every possible way. The first sign of how things had changed came when they stopped at a petrol station at the city entrance. The attendant recognized Raphael, and instead of the suspicion or scandal they expected, the man approached with a respectful smile. "Dr. Sterling, I just wanted to say you're a hero to people like us. You showed that there are still honest people in the world." Raphael was clearly touched. "Thank you, but I just did what was right." "Exactly. And that's rare these days." When they arrived at the flat Raphael had rented in Chelsea, he had sold his penthouse during their time on the Isle of Wight, deciding to simplify his life. They found piles of letters and messages of support. Business owners, young lawyers, ordinary people, all expressing admiration for the courage they had shown. "Raphael," Marina said, leafing through the correspondence, "look at this. There's a letter here from a law student saying you inspired her to keep believing in the justice system. And there's an email here from a small business owner who was a victim of a scheme similar to Deltacom's. He wants to know if we can help him." It was exactly the kind of work they wanted to do. The firm Sterling & Sterling Law and Consultancy opened a week later in a modest office in Notting Hill. Nothing like the grandeur of the old Sterling & Associates, but with something the family company had never had: soul. Marina handled the accounting and financial side, helping clients organize their finances and identify irregularities. Raphael focused on law, specializing in cases of people who had been victims of corruption schemes or false accusations. Their first client was indeed the business owner who had written to them, Charles Rogers, owner of a small construction company that had been falsely accused of overbilling in a public work. The case was almost identical to what Marina had faced: fabricated evidence, falsified documents, and a larger scheme to divert attention from the true culprits. Dr. Sterling, Charles said during their first meeting, "You are my last hope. I've already spent all my savings on lawyers who couldn't prove my innocence." "We will analyze everything from the beginning," Raphael replied. "And if there's a pattern of falsification, we will find it." Marina spent 2 weeks dissecting the accounting of Charles's company, applying the same technical methodology she had used to investigate her own case. And she found exactly what she suspected: the same patterns of digital manipulation, the same inconsistencies in the metadata, the same technical signature of the hacker who had fabricated the evidence against her. "Raphael," she said one afternoon, showing him the computer screens, "it's the same group. The same people who framed me framed him." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. And if it's the same group, it means they have a pattern, a methodology. We can use that to identify other victims." That's how they discovered the scheme was much larger than they imagined. In the following months, they identified at least 20 small and medium-sized business owners who had been victims of the same operation. False accusations, fabricated evidence, investigations directed to destroy competitors or to divert attention from the true criminals. The firm's work gained national repercussion when they managed to completely exonerate 16 of the 20 victims, using digital analysis methodology developed by Marina and innovative legal strategies created by Raphael. "You are creating a new way of doing justice," Dr. Paul commented during a lunch, "combining technology, financial analysis, and advocacy in a way I've never seen before." "It's what happens when you combine someone who understands numbers with someone who understands laws," Marina replied, "and when both know what it's like to be falsely accused." But it was in December that they received the call they had been waiting for months. Dr. Albert Coleman, president of the High Court of Justice, called Raphael personally. "Raphael, I need to speak with you. Can you come to the court?" Raphael tensed. Since leaving his position, he had not returned to the building where he had worked for 15 years. "Is it about the disciplinary process?" he asked. "Not exactly. Better we talk in person." Marina accompanied him to the court, waiting in the reception while he went up to the president's chambers. She was nervous, fearing that some new problem had arisen, but when Raphael came down, 40 minutes later, he had an expression she couldn't decipher. "What happened?" she asked as soon as they got into the car. Raphael was silent for a moment before replying. "The Supreme Court decided to annul my disciplinary process." Marina widened her eyes. "What?" "Apparently, the investigation into Operation False Witness revealed that my recusal from the original case was correct, that my revelation about the falsified evidence was fundamental in dismantling the scheme, and that my conduct, though ethically questionable, served the higher interests of justice." "Does that mean—" "It means I can go back to being a judge, if I want to. Dr. Coleman said I have a guaranteed position in the court with all honors." Marina felt her heart tighten. "And do you want to?" Raphael stopped the car in a car park and turned to face her. "Marina, 6 months ago I would have said that being a judge was my identity, my reason for being. Today, after everything we've been through, after discovering who I really am away from titles and power," he took her hand, "today I know that my identity is being by your side, building something honest, helping people who need it. I don't want to go back." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. Do you know the first thing I thought when Dr. Coleman made the offer?" "What?" "I thought that if I went back to being a judge, I would have to stop working with you, and that possibility scared me more than the idea of never wearing a robe again." Marina smiled, feeling a wave of relief and love that surprised her with its intensity. "So we're officially partners forever?" "Forever," Raphael confirmed, kissing her hand. December also brought the final trial of the main individuals involved in Operation False Witness. Raphael and Marina were called as prosecution witnesses, but this time the experience was completely different. When they entered the courtroom, they were greeted with discreet applause from the other lawyers present. The judge of the case himself, Dr. Ferdinand Moore, made a point of greeting them personally. "Dr. Sterling, Ms. Sterling, it is an honor to have you in my court. Your work was fundamental in bringing us to this point." During the trial, Raphael testified about how he had discovered the irregularities, about the courage needed to expose the scheme, about the methodology used to identify the falsified evidence. Marina explained in detail how the technical part of the falsifications worked, demonstrating to the jury how documents were manipulated to incriminate innocent people. When the prosecutor asked why they had decided to continue investigating even after their own problems had been resolved, Raphael replied, "Because we discovered that it's not enough to be acquitted when you know that other people are going through the same hell you went through. Justice is not just about punishing the guilty, it's about protecting the innocent." The trial lasted 3 days and resulted in the conviction of all the main individuals involved. 38 years in prison for the CEO of Deltacom, 25 years for the corrupt High Court judge, 20 years for each of the prosecutors involved. But the true satisfaction came when the judge, reading the sentence, made a special pronouncement. "This court would like to record that this case was only solved thanks to the extraordinary courage of Dr. Raphael Sterling and Ms. Marina Sterling, who placed the pursuit of truth above their own interests. They represent the best of British law and are an example for all legal professionals." When they left the court, they found a small crowd of journalists, but this time the questions were different. "Dr. Sterling, do you consider yourself a hero?" "No, I consider myself someone who did what any decent person should do." "Ms. Sterling, how do you feel being considered a symbol of the fight against corruption?" "I feel responsible for using this experience to help other people who go through similar situations." From that day on, the Sterling and Sterling firm became a national reference in cases of false accusations and corruption. They received invitations to lecture at universities, for consultancies in other counties, to participate in governmental commissions to combat corruption. But it was on a December night, 2 days before Christmas, that the most important moment of their lives happened. Raphael had been mysterious all week, making secret calls, going out alone, at odd hours. Marina suspected he was planning something but couldn't imagine what. "Wear something elegant tonight," he said one Friday morning. "We're going out for dinner." "Where?" "It's a surprise." Marina chose the same black dress she had worn to the ball where they met, not the exact same model but something similar, elegant and discreet. When Raphael saw her, he smiled with the same admiration as that first night. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. They took a taxi that drove them to the Ritz, London, the same place where everything had begun almost a year earlier. Marina felt her heart race as she recognized the location. "Raphael, what are we doing here?" "Closing a circle," he replied mysteriously. The hotel was decorated for Christmas, with golden lights and floral arrangements that created a magical atmosphere. Raphael led them to the same ballroom where the charity ball had taken place, but now it was empty, lit only by candles and with a single table set in the center. "How did you manage?" "I have contacts," Raphael said with an amused smile, "and a very convincing story about second chances and happy endings." They dined alone in the enormous ballroom, talking about the past year, how their lives had changed and their plans for the future. The same orchestra that had played at the ball appeared during dessert, playing the same waltz they had danced on their first night. "May I have this dance?" Raphael asked, exactly as he had asked a year earlier. "Always," Marina replied. They danced in the empty ballroom, lost in the music and memories. When the waltz ended, Raphael didn't release her. Instead, he looked deeply into her eyes. "Marina, exactly 1 year ago in this very place, my life changed completely. I met a woman who taught me that there is something more important than power or position. A woman who showed me the difference between surviving and living." Marina felt tears well up in her eyes. "In the past 12 months, we've faced things that could have destroyed any relationship. Scandals, pressure, fear, uncertainty. But at the end of it all, here we are. Stronger, more united, more in love than ever." Raphael stepped back a little and, to Marina's surprise, knelt right there in the center of the dance floor. "I know I already proposed to you on the Isle of Wight, and you already said yes, but I wanted to do it again here where it all began. I wanted this place which holds the memory of the beginning of our story, to also hold the promise of our future." He took a different box from his pocket than the first. This one was more elegant, and when he opened it, Marina saw a dazzling ring, not ostentatious, but clearly special. "This ring belonged to my grandmother, the same one who left me the house on the Isle of Wight. She always said she would give it to the woman who made my heart beat stronger than my ambition." Marina was openly crying now. "Marina Sterling, will you marry me? Will you build a life where we can be ourselves, without masks, without pretensions? Will you continue to be my partner in life and in business? Will you help me to be every day a better man than I was the day before?" "Yes," she managed to say through her tears. "Yes, to everything. Forever." Raphael slid the ring onto her finger. The simple engagement ring went to her right hand, this one stayed on her left, and stood up to kiss her. "I need you," he murmured against her lips, echoing the words he had whispered the first night they spent together. "And I need you," she replied, completing the phrase that had become their mantra. When they separated, Marina looked around the golden ballroom, remembering the insecure woman who had entered there a year earlier, hesitant and uncomfortable with all that ostentation. "You know what?" she said, smiling through her tears. "This time I feel completely in the right place. Why? Because this time I'm not here pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm here being exactly who I am, with the man I love, celebrating a life we built together with honesty and truth." Raphael spun her in the air, laughing with pure happiness. "When's the wedding?" he asked when he set her down. "How about on the beach, on the Isle of Wight? Just the two of us, a justice of the peace and the sea as a witness." "Perfect," Raphael agreed. "Simple, true, and away from any unnecessary ostentation. Like everything in our lives from now on." They stayed there for another hour, dancing, talking, planning wedding details and the future. When they finally left the hotel, it was almost midnight, and London glittered around them with the lights of December. "Raphael," Marina said when they stopped on the pavement, "thank you." "Why?" "For fighting for us when it seemed impossible. For choosing the truth when it was easier to lie. For loving me enough to sacrifice everything." "Marina, you still don't understand." "What?" Raphael held her face between his hands, looking at her with all the intensity of the past 12 months. "I sacrificed nothing. I gained everything. I gained you. I gained a real life. I gained the chance to be who I truly am. I lost positions, titles, status, but I gained purpose. I gained love. I gained peace." He kissed her softly. "And besides," he said when they separated, "I have a feeling that our true story is just beginning." Marina smiled, looking at the ring that shone on her finger under the city lights. "Our true story," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." They walked hand in hand down Oxford Street, planning the future, talking about the cases they wanted to take, about the house they wanted to buy, about the children they might have one day. Two people who had discovered that true love was not just about finding someone who accepts you as you are, but about finding someone who inspires you to become the best version of yourself. And so, where everything had begun with an invitation to dance and ended with the promise of a lifetime together, Raphael and Marina walked toward the future, knowing that, regardless of the challenges to come, they would face everything side by side. Because they had learned the most important lesson of all, that sometimes we lose everything to gain what truly matters, and that true love is not just saying "I love you," but saying "I need you," and truly understanding the meaning of that need, not as dependence, but as a conscious choice to build a life where two become one, without losing individuality, but gaining a strength that neither would have alone. On the balcony of their flat that same night, they toasted with cheap champagne and full hearts, looking out at the city that had been a witness to their love story. "To us," Raphael said, raising his glass. "To us," Marina agreed, "and to all the second chances life gave us." And as they kissed under the December stars, both knew they had found not only the love of their lives, but the perfect partner for all the adventures yet to come.